There are many different kinds of idols, and today we're going to look at what I think is maybe the sneakiest idol, the idol of success. You know, an idol is the thing that if you lose it, it would make you feel like you kind of lost everything. Whatever it might be, it's usually can be a good thing. Your spouse or your children, or maybe a hobby you really love, or maybe it could be anything. And these are like counterfeit gods to us. They're things that we get out of order. We put them above God. They're idols. And today I'm calling this the sneakiest idol because you think about it, you know, we want to be successful. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful. You know, to have goals, set lists of what you want to accomplish every day. But you can overboard with it because we live in a culture of competition. In a lot of cultures in the other parts of the world, you get your identity from your family. Okay, who is your parents, and fulfilling your role in that family, that is your purpose. And in our culture, we're much more individualistic, and it's what you do with your life, what you achieve. And that achievement can become our ultimate goal. It's just really easy for that to happen. It can happen in many different arenas. I was thinking of, there was a movie, Chariots of Fire. Once I tried to get my boys to watch it. We were having a guys' night, and I said, okay, we're going to watch this great movie. They made fun of the guys running in their underwear at the first on the beach. And then they looked at their phone for most of the movie, so I said, okay, that's enough. We turned it off. But it's a great movie. When they get the acquired taste that I have, which means that they like everything exactly like I like it, they're going to grow up. Anyway, the movie is about this one guy. His name is Harold Abrams, and he is a runner, and he's a sprinter. And somebody asked him one time, why does he do this? Why does he run? Is it because you love it? And he said, no. He said, I'm more of an addict. And later, before he runs the Olympic event that he's scheduled to run, he says, contentment. I'm 24. I've never known it. I'm forever in pursuit. I don't even know what I'm chasing. I raise my eyes and I look down that corridor 4 feet wide, the 10 lonely seconds to justify my whole existence. But will I? A lot of times we set these goals, and the goals never really last, by the way. You get like a fast fading satisfaction. Like I remember listening to one football player who said, my goal is to be the best linebacker in the NFL. Well, you think about that goal for a second. How many of the high school football players make it to the NFL? Very, very few. And then how many that make it to the NFL start in the NFL? And then how many get to be good in their starting? And how many get to be the best? Only one. So if that person's goal is to be the best linebacker in the NFL, only one person is really going to make that. And, it might not be your goal, but sometimes we have things that we feel like we have to do to be okay. There was a director named Sidney Pollack, and he wrote about this during his final years of his life. He was still working, even though he was really pretty old. He could have retired easily, but he says, I can't justify who I am if I stop. He said it this way. He said, every time I finish making a movie, I feel like I've done what I'm supposed to do, and I've earned my stay on the planet for another year or so. And we have this drive. And you might say, well, that's not exactly what I have. Well, you may not even know it. Here are some signs. I want to look first at some signs that you've made success an idol. And second, we're going to look at the story of a guy who did this in the Bible named Naaman. So beginning, here are some signs that you have done this. Number one, you have a relentless feeling of inadequacy. that you really want to be good enough, but you just don't know. I mean, there are people who succeed in their jobs today who really feel like nobody wants them. Do you know, in this week, Amazon cut 14,000 jobs. This week, UPS cut 48,000 positions. When I was in school, I worked for UPS. They don't let people work there unless they're hard workers. 48,000 people lost their jobs last week. And some of it because of something called AI. And businesses are pivoting, and they're using, computers and things to do the jobs that people used to do. And it's affecting, and it can make people feel inadequate. I know a guy that graduated college, couldn't find a job, kept getting rejected, and so he wrote this letter to this person who rejected. He got a rejection letter. He wrote back a rejection letter to the company that gets sending the rejection letter. He said that this is what he wrote. To whom it may concern, thank you for your recent letter. After careful consideration, I regret to inform you that I'm unable to accept your refusal for me to be employed in your firm. This year, I've been particularly fortunate in receiving an unusually large number of rejecting letters. With such a varied and promising field of candidates, it is impossible for me to accept all my refusals. Despite your company's outstanding qualifications and previous experience in rejecting applicants, I find your rejection does not meet my needs at this time. Therefore, I will initiate my employment with your firm immediately. I look forward to working with you. Best of luck rejecting future candidates. There are people, competent people right now, who feel inadequate. Second, you can become obsessed with your personal achievement. You know, that you want to be really good. Some of you may remember what it was like to get a report card or a test back, and you look at the person next to you and you wonder how they're doing. You know, not everybody graduates summa cum laude, or sometimes it's thank you, Lordy, you know. There's these posts I was reading this last week, terrible things that teachers wrote to students. This is a couple of them. This was high school students. Since my last report, your child has reached the rock bottom, has started to dig. Another wrote this: your child has delusions of adequacy. Anyway, I'm sure that the teachers had fairly similar comments on their performance reviews, but a report card or resume, your personal achievement, you can feel like you're just not good enough. And it goes on in our country, in our culture, with how much money you make, have you been promoted, are you gaining in popularity on media, how are you, what kind of house do you have? Are you living in the right neighborhood? Is it big enough? Is it the right house? Do my kids go to the right school? You know, there's just all these ways that achievement become your God. Third, you find yourself coveting rather than celebrating the successes of others. I mean, you're supposed to celebrate when somebody succeeds. I heard recently of a young man named Brad, and he finally worked up the courage to propose to his girlfriend. And he said, "Sweetheart, I know that I'm not wealthy like Tom, or handsome like Tom, or well-educated like Tom, but I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." And his girlfriend said, "Well, I love you too, Brad, but I'd like to hear more about this Tom guy." You ever find yourself envious of the other Toms in the world? 4. Now, these 3 are all for people who are struggling. What about people who are not struggling, but they're on the other end of the spectrum? They have made achievement their idols, and that's not healthy because they can have a false sense of security, like the guy that has something happen to him, and he goes to the pastor and he says, "You know, Pastor, it's not supposed to happen like this. because he is so used to being successful. When something happens in his family, somebody gets sick or somebody has a financial backturn or something happens, he thinks it's not supposed to happen. I've never had somebody that come to me that is struggling, that is, I'll say, working class or in the poor area, poor part of the spectrum, come to me and say, it's not fair. You know why? Because they know it's not fair. But sometimes when you have all this stuff happening and you're successful, you think you never should have something bad happen. And so you have a false sense of security. 5, have a distorted view of yourself. You might think that you're smart at everything, like the guy at the business man at the party, and people were talking about all these different issues, and he's basically made his money because he knows economics and finance really well. But it doesn't matter the subject, he comes across as being the expert on every subject. Or 6, you cannot maintain your self-confidence unless you remain at the top of your field. In the 80s, there was a tennis player some of y'all never heard of, Chris Everett. Anybody remember her? She was like great. And then she quit playing tennis, and she said this about her life after she quit. She said, I had no idea who I was or what I could be away from tennis. I was depressed and afraid because so much of my life had been defined by being a tennis champion. I was completely lost. Winning made me feel like I was somebody. It made me feel pretty. It made me feel hooked on like a drug. I needed the wins, the applause in order to have an identity. And that is dangerous because we're supposed to have God as our identity. If you have anything else, even success, you're very much in danger. And there's a guy in the Bible that did this. Yeah, I'm going to call him the successful dead man. Okay, his name was Naaman. In 2 Kings chapter 5, beginning in verse 1, Naaman was the commander of the army of the king of Aram. By the way, this is Israel's enemy. But this story is about Naaman, who is the general of the whole army. And it says he was a great man. Everybody thought this was a great guy in the sight even of his master, the king. He was highly regarded. He was like the hero of his nation because through him, the Lord, God gave victory to Aram. So God can work through anybody. God worked through Naaman. He had everything going on. He was successful. He was general. Everybody looked up to him. He's been victorious. He was a valiant soldier, but he had one issue that was really bad. He had leprosy. Now, leprosy in the Bible was this skin disease. It encompassed a lot of different kinds of skin disease, but it was very terrible. It would cause people to be crippled, disfigured. Finally, it would kill their victims. Their skin would rot off. It was just awful. It was, I guess, something like today, terminal cancer. That's what you would think of if you had this. And that's what he had. Even though he had everything else, he had this. Maybe he hid it. I don't know. Now it says in verse 2, there were bands of raiders from Aram who had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, probably 13, 14, 15. And she served as a maid for Naaman's wife. She notices what he's going through, and she said to Naaman's wife, her mistress, if only my master would see the prophet who's in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. So Naaman's wife told her husband. Husband thought it over, guess heard about the power of some of these prophets, and so Naaman went to his master, the king of Aram, and told him what the girl from Israel had said. And the king says, by all means, go. And the king of Aram replied, I will send a letter, by the way, not to the prophet. I will send a letter to the king of Israel. because kings like to communicate with kings, I guess. Didn't really do what the girl says, went directly to the king of Israel. So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing, very expensive gifts. And then he also had a letter. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read like this: "With this letter, I'm sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy." And the king of Israel, as soon as he read it, the letter, he tore his robes. This was a way of expressing his very much upsetness of this letter. He says, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy?" And so the king of Israel they're distraught by this letter. He says, I can't heal anybody. Why is he trying to get me to take this? I don't want to do this. And so he's going to trying to trick me, to pick a quarrel with me, he's thinking. Now, Elisha, he was a prophet in Israel at this time, and when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent the king of Israel this message. He says, "Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." And so Naaman went with his horses and chariots and all these gifts, the gold, sets of clothes. Comes, I can imagine, you can see this group, this group of people coming from a distance. You can see maybe the dust of the chariots driving up to Elisha's house. And when he gets there, he expects Elisha to come out and heal him. That's not what happens. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him. By the way, if you notice, the people who do heroic things in this account are all the servants. I mean, it was the servant girl that told Naaman about how he could be healed. And now Elisha doesn't even go out of the house. If you have somebody famous come to visit you and you don't even go out of the house, you send somebody else to talk to them, and he sends a messenger to him. And he said, "Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." But Naaman, who was prideful, because he was a very successful man, went away angry. He just left. He said, "I thought he would surely come out to me, not send a servant to me, the general, and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God." This is what I wanted him to do. Say something to Yahweh. Wave his hand over the spot. Cure me of my leprosy. Do something. I went all this way to come see you, and now you don't even give me respect. Sometimes we are like that. We feel like somebody owes us. And then he says, "Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed?" And so he turned and he went off in a rage. Now, most of us don't know anything about those rivers. This is a map of the different countries now in this area: Turkey and Syria and Iraq and Iran. And there's these major rivers that went through this area. The Euphrates is one of them. The Tigris is the next slide. It shows these are all rivers that were big rivers. I got another picture. It shows one of the rivers that he was talking about. That's a large river, isn't it? It's beautiful. Now, compare that river to the Jordan River, which is the next one. That's the Jordan River. And so he's thinking, why do I have to go, a long ways to find this river? I could wash just right here. We got a much better river. But a servant steps up. Another servant. Naaman's servants went to him. They were wise. Yesterday we had a men's Bible study for the breakfast at Sandy's, and it was good. And we were talking about wisdom. Wisdom is such in need today, isn't it? We have all this information available to us, but the ability to know the right thing to do. Here these servants had wisdom. They went to Naaman and they said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you just go wash? Just do it. So I guess he gets over his anger. And so he went down and he dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 7 times. Just like the man of God told him. He put away his pride, put away his own thoughts of his own success, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. And the word here means baby. You ever had somebody say, you got skin like a baby? So, you ever had a baby's soft skin? Oh, it's so, put your face next to the baby's face. Oh, it's so soft. And Naaman and all his attendants went back to the man of God, and he stood before him. He's cured. The one thing that he wanted done and he could never have done, he's had happen now. And so now he wants to, bless him. And he says, now I know there is no God in all the world except in Israel. So please accept a gift from my servant, because this general is used to rewarding people, because that makes you equal. If somebody gives you something, you give something back to them. So you don't have to be beholden to anybody. And the prophet answered, as surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I won't accept a thing. Even though Naaman urged him, he refused. You cannot buy God. This is what Naaman needs to learn. You don't pay money to be blessed. God is called grace. It says there were many. This is such a famous story. In the New Testament, it's one of those stories that's repeated by Jesus. It said there were many in Israel with leprosy in the time of Elisha the prophet, yet no one of them was cleansed, only Naaman the Syrian. In verse 17, it says, if you would not, said Naaman, please let me, your servant, be given as much earth as a pair of mules can carry. And so he wanted to take some dirt from Israel back to his country. For your servant will never again make burnt offerings and sacrifice to any other God but Yahweh, to God. Guy got faith. In fact, you can see this because he asked for pardon in advance, because in his culture, he's going to have to, do these things as a man he is. And so he asked this, Elisha, he says, but may the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing. He's asking forgiveness. This man has changed his attitude. When my master enters the temple of Rimmon to bow down, and he is leaning on my arm as his king, and I have to bow there also, when I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord forgive your servant for this. And Elisha says, go in peace. Now, this I think is an interesting story, and I want to look at the second half of it next week when we talk about money and how money is an idol. These are connected. But so far, this is just a terrific story of a person who is healed by God and shown that it's not in his own achievement that makes him right. And in fact, the heroes in the story, there are people who pay the cost for his healing, okay? You know who it was? The servant girl whose family and herself are taken away from their home and made to be a maid, a slave in Naaman's household, but doesn't become embittered. And is really one of the heroes of the story. His servants are heroes. All the people that are the wisest in this story are not the people that everybody looks at as the best, but the people who are the servants. Because this is over and over in the Bible. 1 Corinthians says this, but God chose what? The foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before God. That's how God does it.